don't worry about who I am. If you really want to know about me, just know that I'm risking a lot by posting this. If you had a childhood, regardless of where you were born, you should remember the cartoon The Magic School Bus. It was a children's cartoon show in the 90s, where a crazy science teacher would take students on weekly adventures into places such as space or through the human digestive system. It was rather harmless and an educational show, which is the reason why it's been prominently shown to children since its premiere. What most people don't know, however, about the show was that it was meant to be a fit into a line of horror stories for kids, and a show that was never made titled Horror is Alive. The show, much like Goosebumps' television show, was about harmless horror stories, with 3 being shown in one episode. Despite this, the first episode underwent a complete overhaul during its production. What was to be the opening short was extended to a full-length episode. After the writer and director of the episode went through a long, hard experience with illegal substances, which inspired the middle and end of the short, which, uncoincidentally, is where the short takes a drastic turn. Everyone else, or at least most everyone else, were severely scarred due to this experience making it. Most quit after reading the script, but others were in desperate need of a job, whether it be the animators or mere executives. The whole first season was written, but completely abandoned after the first screening, with the final blow being that the scripts were destroyed in what was once PBS Studios headquarters, after an arsonist, who is now believed to be the writer of the episode, and again director of this episode, obliterating the building. The few who read the scripts claim to say that they were either too gory to air, or too unnerving for children to enjoy watching. These people wish to remain anonymous, and even remain scarred to this day. The first episode wasn't really ready to air before the concept spiraled horrifically out of control and terrified test audiences. Originally planned by PBS, it was designed by Melissa Animation Studios in Russia, and thus the original pilot episode was partially animated in Russia before the first screening. In the first episode, the doubting schoolchildren were brought onto a school bus. It originally did not have eyes, that transformed into a spacecraft and brought them into space, where strange things began to happen. That was the only description that people attended the screening had, so that they had no real explanation for it. After the screening, PBS took the original idea back to the storyboards, fired everyone behind the pilot's production, and remade it with the well-known employees into, obviously, the Magic School Bus. The episode was sent to me in a cardboard box by one of my online friends, who simply gave me his first name, Sergey. Sergey was one of the employees during the late 80s and into the later half of the 90s. His job was merely just checking to make sure the VHS copies of the animations weren't distorted, or any lesser quality than a first-generation VHS tape. He never told me this until I expressed interest in my old job, which triggered him to spill everything. He's much older than me, at 43 years old. The method that he used to obtain the episode was simply sneaking into the Melissa Animation Studios, which is now merely a shoemaking factory, and breaking through the safe which was there when the animation was processed, which was untouched. There, most of the old animations designed by the studio were there. The episode was hard to find, but due to him having seen the original copy when it was sent to him, he could easily identify it. As such, the episode started normally. The reason includes the original PBS logo, but the music is different, with an infinitely descending shepherd's tone replacing the happy intro. The screen is merely black, with Russian words over what must be English subtitles that says, "The Sad Bus." After some research, I found out that it actually said, "I cannot breathe," which makes a little bit of sense, considering it was placed in outer space, of course. The version I obtained was a recut. Despite the fact that it was the original tape, apparently after the horrific reaction, the writer for Horror is Alive and the director of the specific episode, in a pout, took the episode and attempted to edit out everything deemed unsavory by the test audiences, but quit after 3 scenes and collapsed. I'm guessing that the recut didn't include the bus's eyes, but I'm not sure whether it was a layering mistake or something much more sinister due to the fact that the 2 other student characters, Carlos and Dorothy Ann, have no eyes. I mean, they're there, but their eyes are missing, and no one mentions it. The bus also looks more sinister because of the front lights are normal on first glance, though still eye-like, almost like a human eyes while literally frozen. And the grill of the bus just looks extremely sad, like it's in a constant frown. The voice work is also different, with a sense of sorrow and blatant uncomfortableness in the American actors' voices. In the PBS edition, Arnold's cousin, Janet, thinks that Miss Frizzle is boring, so Arnold has a teacher take them into space. In this episode, going to space is where things become very messed up. Nothing from the original episode is here. Instead, the bus, quote, transforms into a spaceship, kind of like the one where you see in a film like the 2001 Space Odyssey. There is no transitions, it just becomes this. The walls are all white, and there seems to be infinite corridors with steep drops. From the outside, it looks like a Soviet space rocket, which still makes sense due to this being animated in Russia, but larger. Arnold comments that this wasn't what he expected and he wanted to go home. Janet and Carlos also seem equally confused, but Janet is smiling. Mrs. Frizzle says that there's an override lock on the ship and nobody can leave until it reaches its destination. We are hurtling towards the sun. Miss Frizzle tells everyone that she can either turn off the airlock and suffocate everyone, only jokingly, before saying that she will put in manual override, but it would take 6 months to reach Earth. After this, the screen begins distorting as the picture goes out of focus in a similar fashion to how Max Headroom hijacking went into transmission during Doctor Who. An out-of-place sideshow was played over what sounded like an acoustic version of the Star Wars themes. The only picture that were shown are that of the planets, with each picture having some subliminally hidden disturbing human elements across the planets being shown. Basically, imagine the planet Jupiter having angry-looking human eyes melted onto it. Realistically, but not something too out of the ordinary for a skilled Photoshop user to have created. She suggests that everyone goes into stasis sleep, when a cancerous sore has developed in Miss Frizzle's face that nobody mentions. However, Miss Frizzle mentions that there are only 9 stasis beds and there are 11 people, including herself. She told them that she'll be fine staying up for 6 months, but one of the students will have to stay up as well. Ralphie suggested they draw straws, and they do so, and Arnold's determined to be the one that has to stay up. Now up to this point, the episode was bafflingly strange, but this is when the show descends into realms that I couldn't make up even if I tried. After everyone goes into stasis sleep, Mrs. Frizzle tells Arnold that originally there were 39 students in the class, but 20 of them died. She tells Arnold that she is going to an upper airlock where there's a separate bed, and she only told the students that there were less beds because she didn't want them to face the idea that one person would have to be alone for 6 months. In addition to this, the time frame for returning home was actually 2 years. She leaves and locks the door behind her from the outside. After this scene, the same distortion effect occurs, as a long string of text appears saying, "But what about Janet?" several times. You could tell that time was passing only because Arnold became more dirty as time passed. The 9 beds lined the walls, and there was a porthole window along the control panel that was deactivated. The food that was left for him sits in one corner in the room. He tries to ration it, but it only lasts him for only a month. He also has no means of a bathroom, so he urinates and defecates on the floor. After about 2 minutes, 2 months have passed, and as Arnold is looking noticeably nervous and disheveled, yet hopeful. He's extremely hungry, more so than he has ever been. Ralphie's catchphrase, "I think I'm going to be sick," begins to play, repeatedly over the music track. I think it was meant to reflect Arnold's mind, but then Miss Frizzle begins to talk. "You're hungry, aren't you?" Arnold now realizes the predicament he faces. He won't survive 2 years in this environment, and if he tries to kill himself by smashing a porthole window, he'll kill his other students. "You didn't leave me enough food!" Arnold screams as his voice begins to crack. Several quick cuts of the spaceship from 2001 play about as rapidly as a human eye can blink. The voice begins to grow darker and more tinged and deeper. "Oh, but Arnold, I did." The animation does a long, slow pan across the room, what looks like a stylization of a wide-angle lens, pointing out the beds. And then the voice changes. "I am your extrasensory nervous system. This is no hallucination, Arnold. I am you." The weirdest and most convincing thing about the animation of the original episode is that Arnold looks very similar to Miss Frizzle. One would think that they're related. They have pale skin, orange hair, and represent nerds. Even their mannerisms, aside from Miss Frizzle's greater achieved sense of confidence, are very similar. The voice began to whisper, "Eat them." Miss Frizzle slowly melds into the background, as Arnold's body parts slowly begin to shimmer, while seemingly grow subtly adding scars. Arnold had attempted to analyze the space chart over the defunct control panel for some time, but only now realizing that he was intentionally trapped here. Did it make sense? The path wasn't leading to Earth. It was heading for a malformed black hole that had strangely appeared in the left of the moon. However, though whatever means, the room was also becoming increasingly hot, so much so that Arnold had to take off all but his underwear. The unclean environment was forcing him to develop more scars and sores, as he slept on his side on the mat before ritualistically taking Carlos from the bed so he could sleep there at night. That was when he had made the horrible realization that none of them were even breathing. Mrs. Frizzle hadn't put them into stasis sleep. She euthanized them. It was only after that he had made this realization that a scalpel appeared near the door. Someone had opened it while he was sleeping and moved the bodies around. The words, "Barrett C. Hope," are scrawled in English on the wall in marker. The increasing need to eat was more apparent now than ever. He looked at Phoebe. He secretly loathed her. This became all the more apparent as he took the scalpel and slowly cut into her belly. He was not all hesitant now. The scene is most disturbing because the angle never changes. His expression was always angry, with cartoon-style eyebrows. For an entire 60 seconds he slices her open, eats her lungs and intestines, peels and eats her skin, and then moves onto the face, slicing off eyebrows and the nose, leaving a shaved skeletal corpse, and the camera time-lapses. The animation is different here. It's more specific, more layered, and more medical-looking. Now the cancerous sores are visibly on Arnold's face as well. The next day the scalpel is removed. For the next month or so he picks on the remains of Phoebe. The next timeline seems more messed up, because now Arnold seems to have begun to hit puberty. He has nibbled on the ears and fingers of every student except Janet because it's his cousin. The scalpel appears again, this time with the words, "Admiral Scorn," written on the wall. Arnold talks to himself frantically. "What does that mean? What does that mean?" He picks up the scalpel and decides who to eat next. He never really liked Carlos either. As he undresses Carlos and begins to slice into him, the student ID falls out of his pocket. It says, "Carlos Ramon. Admiral Scorn. Carlos Ramon." It was an anagram, just as Barrett C. Hope was an anagram for Phoebe Teresa's name. By now, the episode is almost over, and the screen begins to flicker as Arnold begins to gasp for air. "You knew!" Arnold begins to cry. The animation gets very choppy at this point. 2 different shots are seen. In one, the school bus collides with the sun. In another, Arnold continues to eat the remaining students in order based on the anagram instructions. Since it's a time lapse, you only see the bodies and bones begin to pile up. He refuses to eat Janet, his cousin, before ultimately slicing his neck with a scalpel and killing himself. The cancerous sores envelop his corpse. Another scene was supposed to appear, but it was cut. The final shot before it ends was the words, "You're gonna go bonkers in 1998. That phrase, to my knowledge, means absolutely nothing. The retrograde film begins to deteriorate before the Russian words appear. They directly translate to, "Whatever happened to Janet?" There's nothing else. The ship enters a black hole and there's no credits, and Arnold profusely screams for 3 minutes that he couldn't breathe as a burning noise begins to envelop the black layer track. It goes on for a full 3 minutes. I tried figuring out what happened to Janet, but the only real clue is, I suppose, in the animation itself. I tried finding some information about the origins online, which I somewhat succeeded in doing. I only found out about it through articles that I found on the deep web, and a very old post on 4chan with 2 replies which expressed skepticism due to the lack of evidence. I didn't want to upload footage of the VHS onto YouTube, Vimeo, or even Dailymotion because of the gore and disturbing imagery that was obviously going to get me flagged or banned for any of those websites. Sergey also stopped messaging me everywhere I had him as a friend. I put the VHS tape up on eBay before being hit with a $600,000 notice from PBS Company. I got sent a very threatening email. They told me that my life as a professional contractor and plumber was basically over if I ever released that VHS to the general public. They insisted that it was merely a prank regarding some of the employees working on the Magic School Bus having fun, but I know that the backstories, the voice actor's sorrow, the Russian text, the attention to detail, and the matching details regarding the backstory of the actual tape was all too much evidence to believe this. I told them that I had to destroy the tape to cease their harassing phone calls and letters affectionately addressed to blank, as evidently my plumbing profession had ruffled the feathers of some of the higher-ups. They weren't clear what would happen if I had continued. Besides, that would subtly ruin my life, layer by layer. I still have the tape though. It's in with my old college stuff. It'll sit there for days. Days will become weeks, months, and then years. The tape will still be there. And they'll have to pry it from my cold, dead hands. But there's still one more question that remains on my mind to this very day. What happened to Sergey?